finally decided I had enough of all these random electronics and just odds and ends that didn't have a place in my house living on my countertops. So I decided to build a piece of furniture to suit those needs and also free up storage in other areas of my home, like my TV stand, which has just become cluttered with random odds and ends, art supplies, all that kind of crap. So just breaking down some rough sawn walnut. I bought this from a farmer a little over a year ago. It was pretty wet at the time, so it's been drying out and it's finally ready to use. Once I got it all broken down, just brought it over to the joiner, started cleaning up all the faces. Once I had the faces clean, went ahead and just squared up one edge. Afterwards, off camera, I went and ran it all through the planer. After milling, this stuff was all still pretty rough, so it took me a little bit to find a layout that I liked, boards that I could actually get what I needed out of. Once I was happy with the layouts, I went and labeled all the pieces. To finish getting them prepped for panel glue-ups, just ran that fourth side through the table saw, just getting a nice clean edge. Really taking my time with this. Want to try to minimize all the gaps, get as clean a panels as I can out of the wood. Like I said, these boards were a little wonky, so using the domino, just made a few plunges in each, just to level everything up, so I didn't have to go thinner than 3/4 of an inch. I really didn't want to go much thinner than that. I think all of these boards' final thickness was right at about 3/4. From there, just using some Type Bond 2 dark, spreading it on all my seams, popping the dominoes in, and then gluing all the panels up. I think I did 5 panels right out the gate, with a lot more glue ups to come. Once all those panels are dry, I just took them all out of clamps, and then started to get them all dimensionally the same. So first thing I did was rip them all to the exact same width on the table saw, and then I busted out the miter gauge and squared up one edge. The side panels were going to be a little too long for me to safely cut on the table saw, so after I squared the one edge up, I busted out the track saw, and then just using a square, went ahead and cut them all to final length. Now that everything was dimensionally the same, it was time to go ahead and start cutting my miters. So using the track saw, I set it to 45 degrees, and then just took my time and made passes. So I clamped the top and bottom together so those would be the exact same length, even after the miters were cut, and then I did the same thing for the sides. After everything was mitered, I went ahead and marked out for some dominoes and then used the track as a straight edge. These dominoes are going to be holding the bottom shelf, and it's going to make things a whole lot easier when it comes time to assemble. Now we just have a couple of different details to take care of before we go ahead and get this cabinet glued up. So just using the table saw, I made a 1/4 inch deep rabbet on the back to accept that panel. So a couple passes make short work of this. The last detail we're adding to this carcass is going to be a 45 degree chamfer on the front of it. So just set that blade to 45 on the table saw, ran it all through. Now just cutting those dominoes on the bottom shelf. To prep for the glue up, I went ahead and sanded all of the insides of the carcass, which is the 120 grit. Then from there, I'm going to be gluing this cabinet up in 2 pieces. So first, I'm going to get the bottom and the side assembled, the same thing with the top and bottom. To get the miters set, I'm just going to be using blue tape. It really does do a good job of getting those miters closed up nice and tight. Probably should have used a little bit more, but overall, I'm very happy with the results. A big factor for why I made this carcass in 2 parts in this glue up was just the heat. The glue was setting up super fast, so I tried to minimize the stress of it. Got everything clamped, and then I just used little 90-degree corner clamps to get it all squared up. Since the glue was drying on the cabinet, I decided to go ahead and start working on the base. So here I'm at the bandsaw, just roughing out some blanks for all my legs and all my rails, just getting everything cut to uniform size. Used the bandsaw on this just because it made minimum waste. I'm going to put a double taper on these legs, so in order to do that, I'm going ahead and making a down and dirty tapering jig out of some plywood. You basically just set your fence, you cut a clean edge, and then you do not touch your fence. With that clean edge established, you can go ahead and set your piece and get the angle you want, and then just using some scrap wood, go ahead and set up some blocks to hold it in place. This is my go-to method when it comes to cutting tapers. Super easy to set up, very accurate results, and then when I'm done, I still have a piece of plywood I can reuse for whatever else I want, and I don't have to have a dedicated jig laying around. After that was all said and done, I readjusted the jig to go ahead and cut that second angle. And we're about to see a reminder of why it is important to respect all these tools, and once you're tired, to stop working for the day. I kept pushing through, and you see I totally didn't pay attention to that piece I was on there, and I paid the price with some serious kickback. That one left a good sting and actually left a pretty decent little scar on there, so definitely pay attention. It was something that was super avoidable. It was 100% my fault. Definitely lucky. That could have been a lot worse. So let that be a lesson to you. Don't woodwork when tired, and make sure to clear that table saw away from any debris. The next morning I just came out and glued up the cabinet. So more Type on 2, blue tape, and then those couple dominoes to get that middle shelf in there. Off camera I finished cutting all my leg blanks down, and then here I am just going and cutting all the rails to size. So squaring up one end, and then using my stop block on the miter gauge to get everything cut down dimensionally. Here's a sneak preview of what the base is going to look like once it is all assembled. With that in mind, now we're just going ahead and plunging some dominoes, doing an inset on these, so it'll be a little different than that dry assembly there. Played around with it until I found kind of an offset that I was happy with. And then I'm going to be doing this glue up in 2 stages. So I'm going to glue the short ends first, get those clamped. And then that way when I go to put the long rails in, I don't have to fight multiple angles. I can just reference off of those square ends. Makes it a whole lot easier. All right, so now it's time to start focusing on the drawers and the back panel. So roughing out 13-inch long stretches, cutting those out with the jigsaw. And then I'm going to go ahead and joint all the edges just to get everything nice and square. Now we are going to be resawing these boards. It is 4/4 or 1 inch thick maple, and I want 1/2 inch thick drawers. And instead of milling all that down and having that waste, I'm going to resaw it on the bandsaw to just over 1/2 inch. The big advantage to resawing is, one, I'll be able to book match my drawer bottoms, which will give it a cool effect. But then I'll also be saving a ton on material. Lumber costs are still pretty high, so definitely like to save where I can. To get everything down to final dimension and remove all the bandsaw marks, just sent everything through a pass through the planer, got it all cleaned up. With all the milling done for the maple, it was time to go ahead and just cut everything down to final dimensions for these drawers. So I ripped all the edges, and then using a stop on the miter gauge again, got everything squared up. If all that's done correctly, you'll be left with perfectly milled and dimensional pieces for your drawers. The last thing I had to do to those was run that 1/4 inch groove for the bottom. Now we still have to put it back on this thing, so using those 1/4 inch pieces I resawed, just went ahead and found a layout I liked. Keeping this glue up as simple as possible, literally just use blue tape and some regular Type on 2. Just ran it all through there, got a nice bead, wiped it up. All right, more sanding. Once everything is cleaned up with the sander, went over the table saw and ripped it down to its final width to get it to its final length, busted out the track saw again, and made my cuts. But wait, there's more. Getting the base all sanded up before final glue up, then plopping those dominoes in, getting it clamped. This was a whole lot easier than trying to clamp all 4 pieces at once. Now you're about to see me take my perfectly sized drawer sides and cut them about 1 inch too short because for some reason I thought they were a little too big. And then I didn't even bother to recheck before I glued it all up. So here I am gluing it up, unaware of what I've just done, and now I'll have to come up with a solution to fix it. So fun. I'm going to be using undermounted drawer slides for these boxes. Now they do require you to build your drawers a certain way, and they also require you to cut these notches out for the rails to sit on. So that's what you see me doing here, just roughly notching them out. So when I finally realized the mistake I had made when I cut those drawer boxes down right before glue up, instead of going out and buying more maple, I decided to just mill down some walnut, the thickness I needed, and then glued those into the carcass. This piece is going to be going into my home. I'm not worried about it. You're not really ever going to see it unless you look super closely. And if you're looking that close at my furniture, I probably don't want you in my home. All jokes aside, I do want to go ahead and thank you guys again for watching the video, especially if you've made it this far. The support we've gotten so far has really been great. I appreciate every bit of it. So please like, comment, subscribe, share it with your friends, help me grow this channel. I've got a lot more content planned even through the end of the year, so stay tuned. If you want a sneak preview of what's coming up next and keep up to date with what I have going on in the shop, go ahead and follow me on Instagram at jrutstudios. Now, if you look closely, you'll see that I am definitely running out of room on my assembly table between the cabinet, the drawers, the back, the base. So, need to start getting some stuff put into this cabinet. Doing my glue up for the door panels. And then after they were dry, went ahead and squared up the edges and also cut my reveals at the same time, just using a square to make my line. And then I just crept up on that cut till I got a nice fit. The door hinges I'm using on this one are going to be Bloom inset soft close hinges. They're just a European style hinge. So using a little template I picked up, marked all my holes, and then used the Forstner bit to drill it out. Once the hinges were all installed on the doors, it was as simple as taking the door over to my cabinet and lining it up based on the reveal I wanted, and drilling a couple pilot holes, and then screwing in those brackets. Now these are nice, it's a lot easier to remove, they just snap into place, and soft close. In order for my panel to sit in the door, I needed to go ahead and cut a rabbet, so just using a 1/4 inch rabbeting bit in the router, made a couple passes all the way around. This does leave rounded corners, you can square them up around your panel. I decided just to round the panel. Since the main function of this cabinet is going to be to house electronics and all their chargers, wanted to make sure it had plenty of ventilation, even if I had a bunch of things in there hooked up at once. I went over to the big box store and I found this cool sheet of aluminum that is brass colored, so it'll match all the door hinges I'm putting on. And then I just went and used some metal shears and cut it down to size. Speaking of brass door hinges, here they are. A little progress report of how everything's coming. Super happy with how this looks so far. Believe it or not, this isn't even the last glue up of this project. I still have one more, but this is the last panel. This is going to be the adjustable shelf in the upper portion of the cabinet. So, same thing as before. There's some dominoes, some Titebond. To make the holes for the adjustable shelf hardware, I'm going to use this little Craig jig I have. Now, one tip that I've picked up is run your drill in reverse and then put it forward. This is going to minimize all the tear outs you get and give you a much cleaner hole. Here it is, the final glue up for this cabinet. To hold these aluminum panels in, I'm going to be using thin strips of walnut and Titebond hide glue. Now, hide glue is pretty cool because it's great for indoor projects, has plenty of hold strength, but if I decide later on that I wanted to change it out or put a wood panel in there or whatever the case is, you can use heat and you can actually undo that glue bond. Now, before we go ahead and put finish on, I have to resand this entire cabinet and get it all the way to 220 grit. I'm not going to show you all that, but just know it was done and it took a long time. The last thing we had to do before final assembly was go ahead and apply our finish. I'm using Rubio Monocoat's Walnut on this one. It's a hard wax finish. You apply it with a Scotch-Brite pad, really rub it in, let it sit for 15 to 20 minutes, and then you buff it off. This stuff is super easy to apply. It's pretty foolproof as far as getting a good quality finish, especially in a dusty shop, and I absolutely love the way it makes it look. I mean, the results definitely speak for themselves. I am super happy with this one. So with the finish all put on, it was just time to assemble. We're done. And that's going to be a wrap for this one. Thank you so much for watching. Definitely glad to have this project done. Have all my electronics charging in one place, off my countertop. I hope you guys enjoyed. Like, subscribe, make sure to share this with your friends. Thank you so much. I'll see you guys next time.